Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. Thanks for joining us. I know we added this one, I think just last week, so this was a last minute addition. We're glad you guys can join us today. Today, Peg is going to be talking about vegetable gardens. This is the perfect time to be discussing this, and I'm glad you could join us, Peg, to cover this topic right as we're reaching spring. Quick couple of notes for anybody who might be new today. First of all, we are recording today's program, so if you need to leave at all, then or early, then you can access the class tomorrow on our YouTube channel. We'll be uploading it there. If you have questions during the class, Peg will be taking them at the end. Type those into the Q&A box, and I'll relay those questions to her. We'll get through as many of them as we can. My last note, relevant today. If you're joining from outside, so our garden center is located in Northern Virginia. If you're joining from another state, welcome. We're so glad to have you. Just be aware anything relating to timing is going to be relative to Northern Virginia. We're in Garden Zone 7. So just be aware of that. Some of your timing might be different if you're in Maine or Canada or anywhere else, Florida. All right. Well, Peg, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so glad you could come up with this and do this a little last minute. I know I came to you and asked about 2 weeks ago, so I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And it's, of course, second nature to me anyway. As many of you know, my background is farmer's daughter. So in agriculture, horticulture, my entire life, and vegetable gardening certainly has been a big part of that. And it is spring and the weather is still cool. There's still the potential for frost in this Northern Virginia area, metropolitan area. And so there's some wonderful things that we can do outside and a few that we really should hold off on a little bit. And we will talk about both, okay? But today is primarily about vegetables, and we need to start by thinking about the things that we can do in the garden right now. And one that I totally enjoy doing is planting the early vegetables, the cabbage, the kale, the collards, but particularly the lettuce. And I did take some pictures, but didn't get them into today's show. Of the gardening that I have begun in the last few days. And primarily that was various types of lettuce because I love the mixture of the different flavors. And I always like to enjoy having a little bit of the mesclun type mix to make it a little spicy when you pick it. And I purchased the plants, some that we've just gotten in, some beautiful ones, and we get in fresh things weekly. Planted those in as my first, and then seeded in some of the same types of things so that when this group is finished, I'll be ready for the next. They do really well in the cool weather, and even as it gets into summer, as long as they're in part shade, hopefully a little shade from the hot afternoon sun, they grow quite well then also. I did mulch them with some pine straw afterwards, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. But in the meantime, I talk about sharing with the youth, the young. They are our future. They are our tomorrow. And oftentimes, when you take the opportunity of having them grow vegetables, they enjoy eating them then. If you've got one that's a little bit of a picky eater, that's a great way to expand their, their knowledge of how these things grow and how they taste. And when they've grown it themselves, they like to eat it, you know? So let's begin by talking about gardening in containers. And this is a grandson helping me in the garden. He was in the garden with me when he was a toddler and has been ever since. And he's working here with Clara. And this was a picture taken last year, so she's grown quite a bit in the meantime. And we have a frequent question. In our containers, we have good potting soil. Can I reuse this? And the answer to that is yes. But as you have previously used this, that potting soil becomes condensed and it needs loosening up. So I frequently will take away a third of it and use it elsewhere in the garden or in another pot if I need to. And then thoroughly, all the way to the bottom, loosen up that soil and add in some new, fresh potting soil. And Clara is adding some fertilizer. And I'll show you in a moment what that is. But let's go to the next picture, okay? Here she is working away and loving it, absolutely loving helping to make the preparation. And in the next one, she's planting onion sets. But let's come back to me for just a moment, okay? And let's talk about potting soil. Maryfield Garden Center has their own potting soil produced, and it is an excellent potting soil. And it has a little bit of starting fertilizer in it, okay? An absolute favorite, and that's a very good potting soil. Absolute favorite potting soil, but more expensive, is Fox Farm. This has, as it says, ocean forest. It has a blend of things inside it from the earth and the sea. So it has a lot of unique things added to this particular mix. I have frequently mixed the two because I've got great drainage, I've got a good potting soil here, but it doesn't have all the nutrients that's in this one. So I will often mix the two. Although I've used either one straight, okay, because I'm going to add other nutrients also. And those nutrients will be frequently, oh, this is heavier than I thought, frequently be one of the Espoma products. And there are several that I use. This one is called Garden Tone. I keep on hand all of the time Plantone. They're all organic. They're all slow release. And they're very similar. So I will use Garden Tone or I will use Plantone, either one, in those containers, according to the directions and the size container that you see. And I garden in large containers because they don't need watering as often. And you'd be surprised how deep roots go. So I use a good couple of handfuls in that big container that she was working in. So this is a beginning, and we'll talk more about these additives as we go along. But here again, involve them particularly in growing vegetables because they do enjoy those more when they've had something to do with it. In the next picture, we have a learning curve with the little girls. And here they're doing eggshells, okay? And their mother helped them blow out the egg, and use the shells to do their seed planting. This was an experiment for them, and it really worked quite well. They worked over it, all right? But now that's not what I do or what I recommend. It was something fun for the children to do, and you could do it also if you chose to. Here is one of my favorite things because I love to, let's come back to me. I love to plant some of the plants that we get in to get a head start on things. And I did have, amazingly, in spite of the fact that we had single digit temperatures for a while, I had great success overwintering the collards, actually, that I had planted last year and harvested from. And they're back and they're doing really well. And they're going to give another crop now. So I have those going. And just recently, we got in some beautiful small plants. And so I put in a few more of those plants, which will grow along and pick up when the others are getting a little tired. But I also will start some of my tomatoes so that when we get in the tomatoes, I will plant some of those early, but then I will have the ones that I've seeded growing on, which will be kind of like a second crop. But this, I love these large flats that have biodegradable, and you have to wet them. I put them in and put warm water inside and let it absorb a little bit at the time. And then you plant the little seed inside the center. And when it has grown properly, you can plant the entire thing in the garden outside without disturbing the roots. It comes with a little clear dome to cover it to keep the moisture in until those plants actually sprout and begin to seed. So I really do enjoy this particular one, okay? That's my go-to for starting with seeds. So let's continue and see what we've got coming in next, okay? Now, when I'm working in the garden, and my soil is good because I've been working in it for many years, and I did have the soil tested. We here at both garden centers, both locations, will test your soil for free for pH to determine whether or not it's alkaline or acidic, determined by what kind of plant that you want to grow. And so you can bring in a bag of your uh, topsoil and we can test it for you. And that's a big advantage because you really need to know what you're dealing with when you before you start to plant if possible, okay? Now, as I am planting, I love to improve the soil in each planting hole that I do or each row that I do. I don't turn the entire garden at all. I know it brings up more weeds for me. I use a lot of newspaper, as we'll talk about a little bit more, with mulch on top of it. But when I do plant things, I use the Plantone or the Garden Tone, and I use this Coast of Maine product. It's composted fish and lobster. Well, the Indians told us plant a fish under this when we came, and the Indian people knew what they were doing because they were growing their own food, and it works. And so I love this particular product. I also, and we can come back to me because I did empty a couple of these out. This is the Coast of Maine bag, and this is one fantastic product. I really have used this a great deal. So that's a great one, and this is another great one. It's Master Nursery Bumper Crop, and it has a lot of good ingredients in it also to be worked into the soil as you are planting, which is just great. Okay, going to the next one. At this time of the year, this is how I line them out. I may make a little trench, put in my garden tone or plant tone, add some of that compost to it, and then plant in my plants. You can see that I rake aside the old mulch, do my planting, then I will rake that mulch back and add to it. In the following picture, I talk about beginning to do this early planting. And this is the onions that have just sprouted out. And if you come back to me for just a moment, we'll talk a little bit more about the onions. I love them not to form the big onions, which you plant them near the soil surface for that. But I plant those little transplants deeper, little bulbs rather, deeper, because I want the spring onions and I want to use the tops of those onions in a lot of my salads and even in my cooking. So the little girls plant those out for me in the little raised beds, okay? And I get those throughout the season. Also, you plant garlic in the fall, but you can also plant it in the spring. And I grow it more for using the foliage than I do for the garlic itself. But it comes with these large bulbs, but inside of that are all of these small bulbs, and you pull those apart and plant those in the soil about every 2 or 3 inches, okay? And then you get all the beautiful foliage, you allow that to totally mature, and when it dies back, the bulb will have formed. Then you can harvest that, use the garlic, save a few pieces, and continue it. Put it back in the ground and continue that, okay? I totally enjoy using the greens of that because I can harvest a few of those greens. And what's wonderful about that is you can rub the edges of a salad bowl if you like a little touch of garlic, and it will do that. And so I will frequently use that garlic for that. It's also great to use even the greens in making soup. So one of my favorite things to do is to start the onions from the little sets and then start the garlic also. Along with all of that, the next important thing to do is I just started doing in the garden. In the next one, please, Daniel. Yeah, is the lettuce. And there's one thing about growing in containers. That soil warms up faster than the soil beneath it, okay? So you can plant earlier in containers than in the ground. So you can start things earlier here. And I frequently will purchase the plants from the garden center, put them in the containers, and then start lettuce seeds directly in the ground because they'll fall off later. When I harvest from the bottom, the edges, and you can harvest over a long period of time. But you can grow things earlier in a container. And the next one, okay, let's talk a little bit more about getting ready. I don't usually dig deeply in the garden. This is the little display type garden that we have here at the garden center. It's a nice raised bed. And so it's pretty different than the soil that I'm working with at my home. I will do the little rows and plant some seeds of lettuce or other seeds. And I do work that soil somewhat because most of what's in that raised bed is the raised bed planting mix, along with some topsoil. And certainly I use that in that area. I definitely use this coast of Maine. Coming back to me, okay. But I definitely use the coast of Maine when I'm working with that, and then make my furrows or planting holes. Okay, I use the garden home. Another good thing that some people enjoy, and I'm one of them, is mixing some earthworm castings into that. It's really great food. So what have you got going on? What do I have going on? I have going on the plantain or garden home. I usually throw in a few earthworm castings. I use that coast of Maine compost. Once you've planted it and those roots get adjusted in a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, they're going to need a little additional fertilizer. Now you have to analyze, am I an all organic person, or do I mind having some chemical type produced fertilizers? And your choices are a little more limited or and a little more expensive too, but following the directions, Neptune makes a very good product. And it gives you the analysis and the directions for the use of it in mixing it. And it's primarily fish and seaweed fertilizer. So it's complementary to the Espoma products, okay? And then there's the fox farm, which is great for tomatoes and so forth. So every 3 or 4 weeks, I will water in with that. Now, if I'm growing in containers, or if you're not worried about it being totally organic, Jack's Classic makes a veggie feed, and it's a good analysis, the NPK that's on that. And so I will use that. I often will use some of this in containers, but not necessarily in the ground. I try to keep my ground as organic as I possibly can. Okay. Now, Danny, let's go through some of these pictures. Okay. Um, it's fun to try some of the different. A couple of years ago, I did grow beets very successfully. And you can eat the foliage of the beets also, or even chip it up smaller in salads, and it's tasty. But the beets were delicious. And of course, they were organically grown, which is really fun. Now, in the next picture, I don't mind pulling a few weeds, and certainly I have my share of weeds. But I like to cut down on the weeding as much as possible. So in between the rows and wherever I don't have bulbs or something growing, because you can't do this on top of bulbs, okay? I like to put down newspaper, or now I've gone to using cardboard a great deal because a lot of us don't have newspapers anymore. And so they're a little harder to get. As far as cardboard is concerned, we recycle our cardboard. We get a lot of it in here at the garden center. And if you catch us at just the right time, we're quite willing to share if you'd like. So putting the cardboard or putting the newspaper down first and then mulching on top of it. Now, the bag that you see here is an older picture, and it is Virginia Fines mulch. I like the bark, the pine bark. I like that mulch. It's my favorite. This company that we have dealt with for many, many years went out of business. And so we have a different mulch company, but we still sell the fine bark. Okay. And so you could come in and get it. It will just be bagged differently. And in the next picture, talking about growing vegetables in containers, one thing that I do, and I unfortunately didn't get any seeds started early this year. As soon as these come in, and I suspect they'll be in this week or next week, I'm going to grow the sweet peas. And I will grow them on a trellis, and they're very easy to harvest that way. And if you keep them picked frequently, you'll have them go well into summer. When it gets super hot, certainly by July, late July, they're going to stop because they like the cool season. Then you can start them again in the fall from your seeds and grow them into fall and early winter. And in the following picture, it shows that I have also used pine straw as a mulch in my garden. This is good for me, Number one, it's very nostalgic because I grew up in the Deep South and we used the pine needles a great deal as a mulch. They were readily available. And here it is very nostalgic for me, as I said. But they're also lightweight. I had planted out, this was a couple of years ago, I had planted out the various cold crops, the cauliflower, the broccoli, the cabbage, the turnips, the collards. And then when they were in the ground, I put the newspaper down wherever I could and then mulched over with the pine straw because it's lightweight. And people say, oh, it's acidic. No, it isn't. Not really. Okay. So if you're trying to work with your pH or change your pH, that's not going to do it. Another one, good one to use in the next picture, please, is spinach. This was the biggest, thickest, tastiest spinach. And this is a large container. I grew spinach all of the edges. And then in the center, I planted a cucumber because I knew by the time the cucumber reached halfway or all the way up the trellis that I would have finished the spinach. So that was a way to get two crops out of one container. And you can see that when I planted that cucumber, I also put something for it to grow on inside of it. And it's one of our lighter weight tomato catches, which worked really well. I've also grown the spinach in the ground and I have just planted some spinach. And I will harvest that from the base up and it will continue to grow until the real heat takes it away. In the following picture is broccoli from a couple of years ago. It was very, very tasty. And again, in the next picture, you're seeing lettuce growing in the ground with some complementary herbs around it. Now, if you come back to me, well, not yet. Wait a minute. We'll go. We'll wait on this one. Let's go to the next one. Okay. We always are encouraging our wonderful caterpillars that produce either the monarchs or the swallowtails, which one. This is parsley. I love to plant parsley in the garden. And I will start with some plants from here, but I will also plant more from seed because the caterpillars absolutely love it. Now, with these brassicas, that means the leafy greens that we grow, coming back again to me, please, honey. Coming back to me. I thought I did bring it up. Need to talk about the caterpillars and having them not eat our cabbage, kale, and all of those things. The caterpillar that gets on those plants and in abundance when it gets warm, not now, they're not out yet, but when it gets warmer, you can get it, particularly on the broccoli. I know I really always rinse that quite well. But you can prevent that in a couple of ways. One is by the use of Bacillus thuringiensis. We just call it BT. This is all organic. Now you worry, okay, I'm killing the caterpillars. You are not killing the caterpillars that are desirable, that we want. The ones that get on these brassicas, these early vegetables, green leafy vegetables, are not the ones that we desire. Okay. And because they only feed on those things, this only kills them. You will not be killing your caterpillars that become your desirable butterflies because you're not going to spray your parsley. You're not going to spray your asclepias, your butterfly weed. You're not going to spray those things. You're only going to spray those early vegetables and save it, take care of it, use it in the spring, and then you can use it in the fall when you plant those for the fall crop. Now, the alternative to that, if you do not want to use even that spray, and it isn't a fear of killing desirable butterflies, it just doesn't happen. I love to use Harvest Garden, and my son Matthew gave me a huge roll of this for Christmas one year, and I'm still using it because it's reusable. It's very thin, rain goes through it, the sunlight goes through it, and so you can put it down and leave it for quite a while because it's going to be environmentally good for this. I covered my hydrangea Macrophylla, the big leaf hydrangea, which grows on last year's wood and was already coming out. In the early part of last week, we had 20-degree weather, and I knew that that would kill that little new foliage, and so I would lose all of my spring bloom from that. And so I wrapped it very thoroughly. Now, when I wrapped that, and I should have taken a picture of it, I use these big clips like this to clip it together when I go around the plant like that. It's fantastic because it holds it, and yet I've left it on because we have 30-degree weather. Shouldn't bother it at 30 degrees, but if it drops to the low 30s or into the 20s, and that's already wrapped, I can leave it on there. It's not going to be a problem. Looks a little bit like a ghost in the garden, but that's okay for now. All right, if you're doing this in the garden itself, Danny, we'll show them the next picture. This is the cloth, and I have used the sod pins to hold it down and made it quite loose so that whatever I am protecting can grow underneath it and I don't have to run out there and take it off. So you can use it in this fashion. And in the next picture, I did try growing some plants early. I did trial some tomatoes a couple of years back, and it was in a container. The soil is warmer in a container. I put that tomato in the center, and then I covered it so that it could grow underneath, and I could leave it on for a couple of weeks. And I staked it down again with those sod pins, okay? So if we come back to, well, yeah, come back to me, Danny, okay? So we're talking about growing all of those things while it's cool, while there's still the potential for some possible frost. And also, the soil has not warmed. We think about the frost and the up temperature, but we sometimes don't think about the temperature of the soil. And that is also important. And so we really want to hold off unless you're going to really protect that plant in a container or something where the soil is warmer, and cover it over to protect it from possible frost or cold. Hold off on planting your tomatoes and your cucumbers and those things that want warm soil and want warmer air temperatures. Hold off on those for a while, okay? It's really important. I know we have people coming in right now that want the tomatoes, they want the bell peppers, they want those things. It's March, and we could still get frost in early April. We will have a lot of those things in, but unless you're willing to protect them, don't Don't purchase them this week or next week, okay? Because you've got to protect them. If you're willing to take them in and out at night, if it's going to be really cold, that's fantastic, okay? Now, let's talk about planting those things outside, though. Some of the things that really add to our food repertoire, okay? In the next picture, many years ago, Bob Warhurst was trying to figure out this tomato cage thing. And so he had these cages made, and the people produced them for him in two pieces, and they hook together. And they are fantastic, not just for tomato cages, but in the round, they are wonderful cages for tomatoes to grow your beans on, to grow to your cucumbers on, but also you can connect them for a lot of vining, okay, which is a lot of fun, you know. I love to grow the string beans that are vining type, and this is a great way to do it. So I highly recommend these. And he loved doing this in the two pieces because a lot of times you'll plant these plants, not stake them right away, and then it's hard to stake it. But in the two pieces, it's much easier to do. And so I highly recommend those. And you can see some garlic growing away there next to the tomatoes. And I've got lettuce growing around it, okay? Now the next picture, figs are a wonderful thing, okay? I've got figs planted in the lower part of the garden. And even they seem to have come through nicely, even in these low temperatures. Another addition to the garden for you to think about is blueberries. In the next picture, Jamie, the blueberries, and you need more than one variety, so think it through. And you'll need to cover these, and a great thing to cover it with, as just before they begin to turn, because the birds will get them before you do, is to cover it with that harvest guard. The protective cover, and then when you're finished harvesting, you can take it off, okay? In the following picture, this was David Yost deck, and it's a nice big container in which he grew a tomato plant that produced very well for him, and then grew basil all at the base of that. And here again, a warning with the cold temperatures is for basil. Buy that basil, enjoy using it in the cooking, but keep it inside for a little while because it's too cool for it. I love this in the next picture. I love this particular planting because on their deck was a built-in container and it was totally loaded with herbs. When I think of vegetables, I think of herbs because I use herbs in a lot of my cooking. And the following picture is herbs planted near my back door, near the kitchen door. Lots of different types of herbs in that area, and they're all grown in containers. And most of them, with one exception in that container, I lost the rosemary. Rosemary art is the hardiest of the rosemaries. It came through in my back garden in the ground, but it did not come through in that container. So I will have to replace that. And that's not unusual because we had single digit figures, okay? In the following picture, one year I grew a little vegetable garden off the side of the driveway, all in containers. I had beautiful tomatoes. I mixed in some cucumbers. You can see those in the center, the big leaf that crept out over some of the driveway there. And I grew some flowers among it. That was all in containers. So it can be done, okay? In the following picture, in the back part of the garden, I have a lot of plants that are beneficial for keeping away the insects, edible in many cases, and great for the pollinators. A highlight in that are two, well, there's actually three. You can see some of my favorites. Marigolds, the French marigolds. Calendula. I love growing that. And if you deadhead it frequently, it'll go all summer. Nasturtium, all fantastic. In the center of that is a rosemary, okay, which does not exist at this point, okay? But if we come back to me, we'll talk a little bit more about those plants, the marigolds, and we have some now. They will take some cold, but I don't know that they'll take any frost, okay? They are edible. I'm not too fond. I actually love the fragrance. It's very different, but I don't really want to eat this. But you can. But you can decorate your food with it. Not expect anybody to eat it. And I love to use pansies. They give some color outside at this time of the year. The cold temperatures were rough on the pansies outside through the winter, but mine are coming back. I trimmed back the old. I added because it's easy to add to existing containers in the 6 packs. I added some fresh ones, and soon I'll have nice overflowing pansies. They are edible and they are beautiful when you're using them to decorate your food. I don't have pictures of the nasturtiums, but what I'm going to do is grow a lot from seed and then plant some that come into the garden. These will come on earlier. When I'm planting the seeds, and I will do it now and plant some in those little cubes that I showed you, that the nasturtiums are one of the seeds that's better if you soak it for several hours before you plant it. It has a hard outer coating and it will sprout much faster if you soak it. Start it off in just barely warm water and let it sit for several hours. Another thing that benefits from that when you're planting it is okra, is to do it the same way because it has a hard outer coating and needs to be soaked. And you can start these things inside now and have them a little later. There are lots of beautiful calendulas, some different varieties available in seed. And here's a beautiful thing because there's a lot more seeds available easily right now, is if you buy what you enjoy to plant now and plant a few seeds of it, save that and then plant again in the fall for those things that like the cooler weather, okay? When I'm planting the beans, I can soak them slightly and they will sprout faster when you put those in the ground. But these, the beans, the tomatoes, oh, and we had wonderful eggplant last year. All of those things need warm ground and warm temperatures. Okay, going into the next pictures. I love to do plantings. Yes, this is the part of the section that's a cutting garden. Now that cutting garden is also wonderful garden for all of the birds, the bees, and the butterflies. It takes care of all those. And if you cut those things frequently, they will bloom all summer long. They bring in the pollinators and they discourage those that you don't want, okay? So it's fun to mix flowers. Now, if you don't have a lot of space and you do have an area similar to this where you have a lot of color, some are annuals, most are annuals here, some are perennials. There's some perennial sage, salvia in there. You can add, or you could plant a tomato in the center of that, even though it has a cage around it, it's still somewhat camouflaged, and it would be fantastic because look at all the pollinators. You come to that section. And in the next picture, this was taken a few years back, and you can see I have mulched the little pathways. Things have grown along. I have edibles completely mixed with flowers. And I just included the next couple of pictures for fun. Okay. We can go out to other places to be inspired. This is Dumbarton Oaks. And here again, this was taken a few years back, but fantastic. This is summertime, and all of their brassicas, their green leafy things, are finishing up. They had beautiful cabbage and broccoli. It was wonderful. And then they had asparagus, the green leafy thing that you see inside is asparagus that has finished up with the cutting process in the spring and now has that beautiful foliage, which is gorgeous flower arranging, by the way. And in the next picture, this is at the White House. And this again was several years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. And they primarily was raised beds, but I was very impressed with how beautiful it was and how well taken care of. You can see the green leafy things. I see onions. No tomatoes yet because I think it was early in the spring for that. Okay, I do want to leave some time for some questions, but before I do that, I have tried with each seminar to share, bring some of those flowers inside and enjoy them. And so today, we'll see if I can lift this. Okay. Ah, not very well. And unfortunately, we can't zoom. But I picked the beautiful cherry blossoms, and then I did two colors of the hellebores because I have so many hellebores in it, and added to the top of this a little bit of the grapevine. And it's very pleasing to me, okay? So just sharing the flower arrangement of the week with you. Just don't worry about design process particularly, although I enjoy it very much. Just bring them in and enjoy them, okay? All right, Sally, want to take a few questions?
All right, yes, we have questions. Everybody, so we got about 12 minutes. We'll take as many as we can. First question, and I know this is going to be different for every gardener. Peg, which tomato variety does best for you, and which lettuce variety? What do you like to use?
Well, as far as lettuce is concerned, I love a mixture. There's Renee's Garden puts out some very good mixtures, okay? There's one called Cut and Come Again that has a lot of the different leaf colors and textures in it. The masculine mix has some things in it that are a little spicy, a little tangy, and that's a nice mix. There's so many mixes. I've never met a Helleborus that I didn't like. I think I could almost say the same thing for lettuce. I don't think I've met lettuce that I didn't like, and I love them in a mixture. As far as a favorite tomato is concerned, there are so many varieties, so many that it can be confusing sometimes. Um, there are a couple of favorites for the big slicers. I love a good tomato that is prolific, and that's the cherry tomatoes. And most of those produce quite well. I'm going to start a few from plants. I'm going to start some seeds too, which will be fresher a little bit later, okay? Um, as far as tomatoes are concerned, oh, which one is a favorite? I'd have to go back to some of the older varieties. I love the gourmet, the heirlooms. I love them very much, but I have very little space to plant tomatoes. I have very little sunshine for that purpose. And so I narrow the field. I don't grow those. They don't produce as heavily for me as some of the larger, the beefsteak. I love that one, by the way. Beefsteak is a great one, but it would be hard for me to say because I grow different ones each year, okay? And I stick to some of those that are resistant to the diseases, okay?
Alrighty. Next question. If I have my own compost, what soil mixture do you recommend that incorporates my compost for various plants? So if you're using compost from your own garden, what do you mix in with it?
Well, I do my own compost. I don't haul away the leaves. I do a slow compost because I've got the space to do that. And I mix straw to allow air into it. And then during the season, with the grass clippings, I mix that together. And that's my compost. And I don't use it, I don't wait until it's thoroughly composted. I move it to my garden before the new set of compost leaves need to go in. And I use it as a mulch in a lot of my garden. If you don't like that look, you can also use the mulch on top of that. When I'm working it into the garden, I don't mix it in anymore unless I'm planting that specific plant. I just use it as a mulch and it's fantastic. If you're concerned about the pH, which normally you don't have to worry about that unless you've added lime to it. Um, People think that oak leaves will change it too much. It doesn't alter mine that much, okay? So I would say just use your compost as an additive or when you're mixing the soil to plant a new plant. Okay.
Alrighty, next question. My North Arlington yard is pretty shaded. The plot I have available only gets 3 to 4 hours of sun per day. Should I be able to put spinach or lettuce in that plot and succeed?
Absolutely. You should be fine with any of the leafy vegetables. They should grow well for you. And chances are, if you keep them watered, they'll grow even through the summer in the shady environment. So any of the lettuces, any of these brassicas, in the fall and not they don't like in the heat of summer, but fall and whatever. And you can grow dill, things like dill in that area. You could probably even grow, and I love to grow Thai basil. I grow a lot of Thai basil, seeded and plants, because they're wonderful pollinator plants and they somewhat repel. I'm not going to say planting them around some of the plants will repel deer because it doesn't always, doesn't deter the deer. But yes, even in the shade, certainly the chives, things like that should grow okay for you. So I'm not sure that you could grow a tomato or a cucumber or a squash, but if it were me, I'd probably try it. Okay.
Yeah, I've definitely tried tomatoes with like 4 hours of sun. Um, the cherry tomatoes.
The
Uh,
cherries, yes.
yeah, I've seen small snails in my garden. I don't think anyone's ever asked about snails before. Peg, how do you deal with snails? Do you have
Well, with the snails, and we all have snails, and the moister it is, the more snails we have. There is a product that we sell here called Sluggo. There's one that is an organic one, okay, that can be used around those. And just look at the directions to use on it, which is one way with the snails and slugs, okay. If you don't use too much of it, I have a lot of wood ashes, which are fantastic and they're very high in potash. And I use them around some of the plants that really enjoy a lot of potash, but you have to be careful because they are alkaline and you don't want to make the soil too alkaline, okay? Um, if you just sprinkle a little around, that helps to repel them too because it's rough for the snails and they don't like it. Um, what else do I do? Primarily, I love to use the Sligo. I do definitely use some of the ashes because I have a wood burning stove. Those are the primary things that I use, you know. Now, if you have um, snakes, also eat them. Okay, I'm not terribly fond of snakes, but I know what a gardener snake looks like, and I know that they're doing a good job getting rid of some of those things. I'm not fond. I grew up where you didn't want to be around a lot of snakes. They were the poisonous kind. So I'm not fond of snakes, but I do appreciate what a gardener snake does. Okay. Other than that, that's pretty much what I do is use this Lego, use a little bit of the wood ashes periodically. Obviously, that's going to get washed away in a heavy rain and you have to reuse it, okay? But those are the primary things that I use. Now, they don't like copper, and I think we still sell down there little copper strips that you can actually put around the edges of your containers and they won't crawl over that.
Oh, that's
So
interesting. Okay.
I do know that that works, because I've tried that. Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Alrighty, next question. For the garlic, what is
Yes.
the best for planting in Virginia? And should you plant them, excuse me, should you plant them before or after the last frost?
You can plant them now. Get them in as
Okay.
soon as
So
possible.
before is fine.
Now, I did, and I intended to bring up some more soil. Last week, when we were talking about starting bulbs a little early, this is something that I'm trying right now, and that's by using the baggies and putting some potting soil in the bottom. In this case, I fill it half full, and then just get it started early inside where it's quite warm, warmer than outside. I just planted some of these in the garden in a raised bed. But I'm going to try putting some potting soil in here, putting several of these cloves to pre-sprout them, to kind of give them a boost, to keep them where it's quite warm. And on a few of these cooler nights, I will uh, light up my stove, and then it's nice and warm around that. And I think these will sprout sooner and just go ahead and put them in the garden as soon as I see that they've sprouted. I'm going to try that. Gardening is trialing things too. We learn by trialing things. We learn by talking to each other. And I haven't done this with garlic before, but I'm going to try it. Going to try it.
All right, thank you. Yeah. Okay, she asked, did you have a preferred type of garlic that you plant?
We don't have a whole lot of choices. We get these wonderful things in from the Netherlands, and this one is California variety, and I use it. Some's a soft neck, some's a hard neck. I do plant some elephant garlic every now and then because the elephant garlic is a much bigger bulb, but it's that use the term sweeter if garlic can be sweet. Um, it's not as strong as these, but no, I wouldn't tell you that I have a favorite type of garlic. I grow a lot, but uh, I don't grow it specifically to get a lot of big bulbs. Okay.
Okay. All right. I'm not sure we have a few more questions, but I don't think we're gonna be able to get to them all. We have a comment, how big is your yard? I know it's big. You've room to do a lot of things. Let's see. How tall for indeterminate tomatoes? How
Yes.
tall do you need the tomato cage to be?
Well, our tomato cages are pretty much 5 feet. And,
Okay.
and if they grow taller than that, they're going to topple out. Or you can buy a stake to go down the center and tie up the top one.
I feel like
Okay.
there's a picture of David Yost, who, if y'all don't know him, he's like 6 feet tall at least. Holding
Yes.
his indeterminate tomatoes like over his head.
Yeah, sometimes they do that. Yeah.
Okay. We'll make this our last question. Sorry, guys. Oh, Okay, we have two. We only have two questions. We can do these. For tomatoes, how do you prune them, if at all? Um, do they get too unruly? Is there an issue with sun and air? So do you prune your tomatoes or do you just let them go?
You can go online and see how people prune them. I never do. Okay.
Okay.
I don't. So I don't get into that. I
All right.
don't.
And here's our last question. Do you mix perlite into your potting mix?
Only if I think it's necessary. In these potting mixes that I mentioned to you, it isn't necessary. Now, if you're reusing last year's soil, 3 or 4 handfuls into that wouldn't be a bad idea because it's somewhat aerating it, and that's what it's good for, to lighten it. But otherwise, the types of things that I mentioned to you, you don't need to add anything to. Now, before you go away, I'd like to share one plant that people may not be accustomed to that I find delightful, and that is celery. I love celery. And this particular variety is sort of a cutting celery. You can say these are what I love, these 6 packs. They're fantastic.
That's soy?
No, it's celery.
Celery. Okay.
Right.
Thank you. Okay,
Celery.
celery.
What I grow it primarily for is not to produce the fancy celery stalks. You can do that. I haven't succeeded in this area, and you have to mound it up to whiten it off. What I do is grow this as if I were growing parsley, and when it gets bigger, I cut the stems and I either cook with it or I put it in my salads.
Oh,
So
I
I
like that a
use it
lot.
as a cutting celery rather than waiting for a stalk per se. It is delightful. So I highly recommend you try that if you haven't before.
I want to try that myself. Okay. Peg, thank you so much. We appreciate it. This concludes our webinar for the day. Everybody, please remember we'll be sending out a link to the recording tomorrow as well as a coupon. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us or call the store or go visit Peg at the Fair Oaks
Yes.
location. Peg, do you want to close with anything?
No, just get out there and garden in the early spring with these things and take some young person with you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Peg. Have a great afternoon, everyone.